Hello, thank you for watching this video. My name is Emma Medina. I'm speaking from Eindhoven in a rainy day here in the south of the Netherlands, where I work and live as a curator, art historian, and educator. As a long-term collaborator of the Association of Arte Útil and archivist there, I'm super excited today because I get the opportunity to have a conversation with India Lovejoy, who collaborated in the project Row Houses in Houston. And the project Row Houses is a project initiated by Rick Lowe, James Bettison, Bert Long, Jesse Lott, Floyd Newsum, Bert Samples, and George Smith in 1994, which is part of the Arte Útil archive. So first, I wanted to thank India for agreeing to having this interview, even in this traveling. I think she's in New York now. She will explain us better. So just to break the ice, India, could you just introduce yourself and tell us a bit, how did you get in contact with the project Row Houses and what was your involvement there?
Absolutely. So I originally started working at Project Row Houses in 2015, and I was introduced to the organization by Rick himself. I had just moved to Houston with this idea that I really wanted to work in the arts while also supporting artists, and specifically at a nonprofit. And so through some mutual contacts, someone introduced me to Rick, and then Rick kind of was listening to what I was doing, and then he offered me a job, and it was incredible. I had just finished college, and I started my first job was really just to start a new program there, and so it ended up being a collaboration between me, the community, the organization, and all the artists that had ever done exhibitions there. Just in context, there's 7 art houses, and this when I had joined, Project Row Houses was in the process of celebrating their 25th year anniversary. And so at that time, there was about 400 artists that had shown exhibitions there, or installations, exhibitions, a whole variety of things, obviously. And so I was working within that pool of artists to help sell their work through the Collectors Club, which was the name of the program that I was launching. And so we did about 9 shows and I think maybe about 24 events in my first 2 years there. And so it was just a lot of artist engagement, and that was kind of just the beginning of everything for me, really.
Wow, that was an amazing opportunity, I imagine. And actually, do you have then any previous experience with social engaged art practices? How do you feel about the idea of art becoming a tool for social transformation?
No, that was my first opportunity to engage like that with art and artists in general, and also just like the community of Third Ward. I think it's a great space to have a first experience because you really can't ask for anything more true, and in the mix in the world really than Project Row Houses, because they've laid the groundwork for the work to continue on a daily basis. So you get to see it happen in real time. It's like a living, breathing function. I think when it comes to art affecting the transformation of a community or a neighborhood, uh, Rick said something really, really powerful to me the other day, which was about this idea that people in the neighborhood didn't even know what the word installation meant until Project Row Houses came around into the community. And it sounds really simple, like learning a new word. But when you really look back and deconstruct just like what it really means for someone to just learn that word in that context, in their own neighborhood across the street from them, walking into a house that looks just like your house and then people framing it as an installation, it's something that can really pull people outside of themselves and outside of their situation to experience something new. But beyond that, one of the historical programs of Project Row Houses is the Young Mothers program, which is for young women in the community to essentially find refuge in this house and work on themselves as a woman and as a parent over the course of 2 years. So they have 6 women in the program at a time. But while I was there, I was able to talk to a lot of these women, and for them, it was a very similar experience where until they were living on site and seeing all of these artists work every day, they just never thought about art like that, and they never really gave themselves an opportunity to explore art in that way. They might have lived in the row houses their whole lives, or sorry, not the row houses, third ward, and then they've been to the community events, but not everyone always engages with the art. So the first time you see someone that's has been locally involved experiencing the art for the first time, it's always really incredible, and it inspires them and moves them in ways that a museum never could, the way a gallery never could. It's something about being where people are at, so that they don't even have to meet you there. They just have to keep living their lives, and the art becomes a piece of their lives and effectively a piece of themselves.
Wow. It really sounds amazing. I really like this idea that you are just highlighting this difference between the space of the museum and how we behave even, in front of the art when we are in the museum, and how it could be when you are really, getting access to the art in your space, like in your, like daily life. I think it's super interesting. And tell us
Right.
more about your project. I mean, what did you do, with the this program that you
Collectors
started?
Club. Yeah.
Yeah, how do you
Yeah.
use the project row houses in a way as well, and how do you really, kind of activate this program?
Okay. Um, so the whole concept behind the Collectors Club was, it came from Rick, actually. He wanted to bring home, or not bring home, sorry, close the circle for a way that an artist can reconnect with the organization. So, like I said, there was about 400 artists that had worked with Project Row Houses in the past, but the only way to really maintain that connection was to participate in the gala, right? Which is typically like donation based or some kind of an auction. And he just kind of didn't like that anymore. And so he had proposed, to the board that they'd launch a new program called the Collectors Club. And the Collectors Club would be an effort to essentially raise money, but focusing on selling and showing artwork on an annual basis rather than just one night at a ticketed event. And so essentially I started by doing a lot of research, not only about programs that existed for collectors at different nonprofits around the country already, but also specifically for the artists, because I was in school studying management, but not necessarily artist management or, art sales. Like, it's actually, you can't really learn in school how to sell art. It's definitely the kind of thing that you have to learn hands on. But either way, I had to interview artists to tell me how they wanted me to sell their art from a nonprofit position, because it's like I wasn't making a commission or anything like that. I'm just raising the money for the organization and then also making the sales for the artist and the organization. Um, so it ended up becoming this like three-part approach where, one, we also wanted to incorporate a very large element of education so that people in the neighborhood and people that were just starting to have access to disposable income, like young professionals, for example, we wanted to make sure that they understood the process of collecting art. So a large part of my research was just learning how to talk to people about, the cycle of art, and like this idea that when you buy art from an artist, they use the money to make more art. And so in an effort, you are, propelling the culture and the creation of art by supporting artists. So that was like a big moment that we used to talk about a lot. Like Brother Jesse Lott, um, he was the one that talked about the life cycle of art, and just like, this idea that it's conception, creation, collection, and then, back to conception, creation, and collection. And so it's like going through that cycle. And so the role of the collector is to preserve the art. And so I talked a lot about education, but then it's also about, supporting the artists who had participated at the row houses years ago and never got an opportunity to do another round. Now they have a moment to have like an exhibition at the row houses. They have a moment to make some sales, to create some economic transaction between them and the nonprofit again, on an ongoing basis. Then finally, it was about, fundraising for the organization. So we didn't just get a new program. We eliminated the gala as it was, which, had the art auctions in it, because we just started to question the notion of, privatized events. And one of the big areas that are the tagline, I would say, that we use around Collector for the Culture a lot was the democratization of art collecting. And that notion really deeply affected me. Just this idea that art collecting should be for everybody. And even if the work is not affordable for whatever reason, that there's still a way to make sure that people have access to it. I think that there's multiple means to that, which is, it's like socially engaged art by having the art present in a community space where anyone can see it. And I think the incredible thing also about Project Row Houses is, the artist list is very diverse, so you have artists that did a show in the 90s and now they just have these like incredible careers, and they haven't been back to Houston or they haven't been back to Third Ward in like 2 decades. But they've got me calling them up like, hey, will you do a show with us? We're doing this new program, will you support? And they're like, I love the row houses, I would love to be there. But all of a sudden you have like, a show with Robert Pruitt in it, and then right next to it you've got a neighborhood artisan who's making things with their hands and just scraps of things that they find in the neighborhood, and those kind of juxtapositions and that range of work on display really made the program incredibly special. So like I said, we did 9 shows, each kind of spanning a view window of about 6 to 8 weeks, and then about 24 events. And so that was all in the course of about just over 2 years. But I ultimately ended up leaving the organization. But during those 2 years, we were able to accomplish a lot. And I think we showed almost like 60 different artists. But it was really incredible to see how it happened. But I think, the biggest value for me was like being able to meet so many artists and then have these dialogues with them about having art be sold, and just like the perpetual, like these like philosophical ideas, it's like selling art that shows a lot of Black bodies primarily to people that are non-African American descent, and only making it available to their audience, right? This idea that a Black artist can reach a certain price point, that it boxes out so many folks, so we had a lot of people actually work with us to make work accessible for the Collectors Club or Project Row Houses, and we were able to have a lot of those dialogues. One of the other things that we did, which was totally crazy, was these collector conversations where we would invite art collectors to come to the row houses, and we would invite everyone, that was interested to sit in a circle and just ask this person about collecting art, buying art. And that those are really special as well, because, I mentioned interviewing artists about selling art and what their preferences were. But I never sat down with the collector. I organized the event, but I never really thought that I needed to interview the collector, because I kind of just thought like they didn't matter in that same way. And in a sense, I think I still hold that same sentiment. For me, I always focus my practice on the artist and the art and the engagement around the art and the artist. The collectors come. I never really got compelled to be like a hardcore salesperson, you know, where it's like, just give me the art, and then I'm sitting there with my collector at dinner for 3 hours, and then I'm over at their house. You know, it's like, if you want the art, I'll make sure you can get the art, and I'll make sure you know everything about the art. But I would rather sit down at dinner with my artist, you know, than with the buyer, even though they play a very critical role. It's not supposed to be that way in my mind. But either way, back to the collector conversations. It was incredible because at one of these collector conversations, the collector just pulls out a Rauschenberg, this small Rauschenberg, and passes it around the room, you know, for everybody to like hold and look at as she talks about, you know, her experience as an art buyer. But, you know, in a way, it's kind of ironic because that's one of the reasons why, you know, it's more important to focus on the artists and the collectors, because the collectors are like, okay.
Yeah, you never know exactly. No,
Right.
but I think
But yeah, that was the program.
yeah, actually, and the program is still keeps going on, or was something that they just had a specific temporarily?
Well, a lot of stuff has changed since then. So this is like 2015, 2016, 2017. You know, so that was about 4 years ago. Since then, they've launched a lot of other programs. And in addition to that, they've turned over a lot of staff as well. So, no, the program is not still going, although you can still see it on their website, I think. I'm not sure. But to my knowledge, no, it's not still going. I don't think it kept going after I left. It kind of transformed into just like a regular membership program. I don't, but I know they did not keep doing exhibitions. They still do the rounds, but it was, you know, I started this dialogue about this idea that it was one of Rick's ideas, and so, you know, without me there, without Rick there, because Rick was in the process of doing, you know, Documenta 14, and then also launching Victoria Square Project, his Athens
Mm.
project, which is, you know, that's still going on to this day. But at that time, like, Rick was gone in Greece about 2 weeks out of every month for a year. And so, and that really only got more and more even after I left. And then he was also traveling a lot. You know, he had just received the MacArthur. So it's like he planted this seed and I watered it diligently. But eventually, you know, everything kind of comes to pass. And so the organization just found a different way to engage artists and to engage people in the act of buying art. But I think they just had to prioritize more than anything addressing the concerns of gentrification in the neighborhood. And so a lot of the efforts kind of transformed into the Emancipation Economic Development Council, which was, like I said, you know, addressing gentrification in Third Ward, which was an incredible feat. Also, something that, you know, was launched and inspired by Rick, which was an incredible thing to witness. But yeah, that's where they're at now. The EDC has grown into its own nonprofit organization. They've acquired new properties since then. You know, they've developed more affordable housing as an organization. They really fell into this idea of being a leader of the neighborhood when it comes to, you know, the economic advancement of the community.
Yeah, and that's something that maybe I wanted to ask you, after all this time that you work there and you have keeping collaborating with Rick Lowe, and you have now much more experience about social engaged art in some way, and in the practice that is so in a way giving you a different insight and different approach. What do you think? Do you think that really art can change the general perspective that we have, the perception that we have about the specific social issues, or
Mm.
really can help to build these different narratives and the different approach, providing these kind of alternative tools to deal with these problems differently?
Absolutely. although it's not as easy to do as some people think it is. Because, I could go and as a socially engaged art project, I'm going to stand on the street corner and I'm going to just like give away flowers all day. How do I measure that? Who's going to be like upset about that? Who's going to, who's like, how do I know if I'm changing anything? But I can call it a socially engaged art project. People have like um, a lot of different ideas on how to do socially engaged art. But I think the one thing that I'm learning the most, because, we haven't really talked about this, but I was working for Project Row Houses, but now I am Rick Lowe's studio manager as a painter. Because one of the main things that happens between then and now is that, Rick also left the organization because Rick never really had like a role as a director, but he was the founding director, but it wasn't so much as a management thing. But anyways, he left the organization in that capacity and started painting again. And so now he's painting and he's still doing community engaged projects around America. So, we were just in Tulsa, Oklahoma for the 100-year and or the centennial moment of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. And so being in Tulsa and talking about, socially engaged art was truly an incredible experience because, a space like Tulsa has such a deep source of pain and trauma that the art that comes out of the community there tells a very rich story. And it's very interesting because until Rick's project, which was the Greenwood Art Project, started, they weren't really having this dialogue, artistically speaking. They were talking about it, they were making kind of like memorials or marches, but they weren't making art. That nobody was asking them to make art about what happened. And it really prompted a lot of dialogues. And so back to your original question about, art as a socially engaged practice, creating a transformation of like perspective for people. Um, there was this one project that kind of told the story of the narrative that was about how the massacre started. And the problem with it was the fact that nobody really knows. There's just kind of like a rumor or a commonly accepted narrative, right? Um, and this project tells this commonly accepted narrative, but it didn't push the boundaries at all or even remotely highlight the fact that it could be very false, and that many people were kind of just not very happy with the project. But then beyond that, it prompted all these dialogues where people are upset and we have to have these conversations like, why are you upset? What is prompting you to have this reaction right now? And art is at the center of that discussion. It's like we're not just talking about how a massacre started 100 years ago. We're talking about how sorry, I keep trying to see if I can find a better seat. Anyways, we're not just talking about how massacres started 100 years ago. We're talking about an art project that was just made, 7 weeks ago, and it's this narrative that they're trying to tell us that we're having a shift in perspective about. And so I think that's kind of a wordy answer, which I give a lot of those. I'm sorry now, but it did shift a huge perspective for a lot of people, I guess is the point, and so I just saw that in real time. And I had a lot of conversations with Rick about it because I was like, why are we, allowing this conversation to go on? Because it's wrong and it's pushing an agenda that, we fundamentally don't agree with. And he's like, no, it's not. It's not pushing an agenda. It's prompting all these conversations. And it reminded me about one of those collector conversations I had done at Project Row Houses all these years prior. That one of the collectors had said something along the lines of like, I buy the art that I love and I buy the art that I hate. Because he's like, the things that affect me enough to make me hate it are touching me in a very similar capacity as the things that make me love it and want to buy it, you know? And I was like, that's really interesting. But I guess the point that Rick was trying to make is that if someone joins a conversation in the artistic capacity that prompts social dialogue around a historical moment, something that affects everybody in the city, and now this art has become like the critical core of this conversation, whatever happens as a result of that is the socially engaged art. It is the conversation, you know, it is the shift in narrative, it is this change of perspective, it is the highlight of the problem and the solution at the same time, you know. And so yeah, I guess, yeah, I believe in it 100%. And I've seen it happen in so many unique and real ways. In fact, this is almost a little bit fun because most of the time when I'm doing interviews, I'm talking about things that just like happened, you know, a couple months ago or a couple days ago. But now it's kind of cool to look at the journey as a whole. But yeah, I mean, art has an incredible power when you use it to engage people. You know, I've been able to use the practice of social engagement in my own work, selling art and producing shows independently. That's been really incredible because I think about the people. I think about how I can touch people with this art and not how I can make a sale. And as a result of focusing on, you know, giving people a point of engagement, even if they can't make a purchase, that inspires them to want to make a purchase. Not saying I've turned socially engaged art into like for profit, but it's really just this idea that people need to want to support the artists, and the only way to do that is to genuinely invite them to participate without making an ask or a sale, and then giving them education and telling them, you know, why it's so critical to support artists in this way, and try to remove, you know, stigmas behind it that, you know, a lot of people have about art, especially at the most, you know, early levels. So um, I think I answered that question probably twice, but yeah.
Well, I think it really connects with the question that I had, like the last question that I had prepared for you today, that was really about the Black Buddha Creative Agency. So it's about, if you want to tell us a little bit what it is and how do you think that the project Row Houses, your collaboration, inform the foundation of that platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why I was like, it's really interesting to talk about it in this way, like, you know, start to finish. Um, it's been an incredible journey. So I was at the row houses for just over 2 years, and after that, I had all these ideas, you know, and there's all this stuff I wanted to do on top of the fact that one of my main goals about coming to Houston was to start Black Buddha. I had been working on that well before I even knew what Project Row Houses was. But the problem is I didn't really know what I was doing. You know, I just kind of knew I wanted to do it. And so I spent all that time researching there and then having these like incredible moments like inside of Third Ward, inside of the row houses that I just kind of had to take a step back and think about how I could do things differently. One of the other things, which, you know, is not the case now, is that when I was there, the row houses were going through like a, a financial crisis in a way, which ironically was partially because we didn't have our gala. But that wasn't the only reason. You know, it's a lot of property, and that's just the world of nonprofits. Now, the row houses have actually been fortunate enough to be gifted $7 million in the last 9 months. They got money from the Ford Foundation and then also from Mackenzie Scott's new program, Seeding for Seeding. But anyways, back then, that was not the case at all. And my position had been rolled over into like 3 other positions. So I wasn't really working with artists anymore. And that was what I was the most passionate about. So when I left, I started Black Buddha. And so I started by using these alternative locations. I would essentially, find walls where I could find walls, and I would tell people, what I could do, what I wanted to do. And, they would either let me activate or they wouldn't. But, I was fortunate that many people were really excited about me kind of doing this project. And so I produced a couple of shows. I started working with artists. I started kind of like building up a narrative. But then beyond everything else, like I said, I was always really dependent on artists to lead the way for me and to help develop me into the dealer or agent that they wanted me to be. Which, in retrospect was incredibly generous of them, but also even of myself, because like I said, so many collectors or so many like sellers want to just serve the buyers, and they don't think so much about serving the artist. But I really wanted to serve the artist. And so, like I said, I allowed them to like mold me into who they needed. And so, anyways, yeah, I started doing my own shows, and finally somebody was just like, we have this building, it's incredible, we just renovated it, but we don't know what to do with it. It's been sitting empty for like 2 years. Will you turn it into a gallery? Like, please activate it. And so, before I knew it, I had the keys to this like 1,500 square foot refurbished shotgun house that kind of almost looked like a church house. But I started doing, shows and artist events and programming there too. And then I started really getting deeper into fine art services. And I kept using artist curators. So I would use artists as curators purely because one thing I recognize is artists respect artists more than anything else. And so when an artist asks you to participate in an exhibition, the chances of the artist saying yes to the artist are like exponentially higher. Because when I ask, or if like a museum asks or an institution asks, there's already a lot of like context that's going to inform the answer, but then having the artist ask, it's an open floor plan, it's a clean slate, because truly it's like they're looking at this participation as a way to okay, the seat that I want is open. We're gonna move over